Hey everyone! Before we dive into the story, let me know in the comments where you're watching from today. And if you love stories with unexpected twists, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens next. Now, let's get into the story. It was a warm, sunny afternoon. The sky was bright blue with fluffy white clouds floating lazily. A soft breeze blew through the trees, making the leaves dance. Birds chirped, children laughed, and people walked along the paths, enjoying the peaceful day. In the middle of this calm scene, a woman walked with her dog. Her name was Sarah, and she was blind. She couldn't see the tall trees, the colorful flowers, or the people passing by. But she could hear the rustling leaves, the barking dogs, and the chatter of families having picnics. Sarah was in her early 30s. She had dark brown hair tied in a ponytail and wore simple jeans and a blue t-shirt. She walked with confidence, holding onto the harness of her guide dog, Max. To most people, Sarah looked like any other blind woman with a guide dog. They saw her as gentle, quiet, and maybe even weak. But what they didn't know was that Max was not an ordinary dog. Max had a secret. He was a retired Navy SEAL canine, one of the bravest, smartest, and strongest dogs in the world. Max was a large German shepherd with golden brown fur and deep, wise eyes. His ears were always alert, listening to every sound. He moved smoothly, never missing a step. To Sarah, Max was more than just a dog. He was her protector, her best friend, and her eyes. Before he became her guide dog, Max had served in the military. He had been trained to sniff out danger, find lost people, and even fight in battles. He had saved many lives during his time as a Navy SEAL canine. Now, he was retired. He had traded the battlefield for quiet walks in the park. But even though he no longer worked with soldiers, he was still sharp, strong, and always ready. Sarah didn't need to see to know that Max was special. She could feel it in the way he moved, the way he listened, and the way he protected her. Sarah and Max walked along the paved path in the park. The ground was warm under their feet, and the smell of fresh grass and blooming flowers filled the air. People moved aside as they passed. Some smiled at Sarah, though she couldn't see them. Others whispered, watching her carefully. "She's so brave," someone murmured. "Amazing how dogs can help people," another person said. Sarah was used to hearing things like this. She didn't mind. She knew people were just curious. Max, on the other hand, didn't pay attention to the people. His focus was on Sarah and their path ahead. He listened to the world around him: footsteps, voices, the wind, and even the distant sound of a bicycle bell. But then, something changed. Near a wooden bench, not far from the path, a group of 5 bikers sat talking loudly. They wore black leather jackets, ripped jeans, and heavy boots. Their motorcycles were parked nearby, shining in the sunlight. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scar on his cheek, glanced at Sarah. He nudged his friend, a man with a red bandana tied around his head. "Look at this," he said with a smirk. "A blind lady walking all alone with her little dog." The others chuckled. "She probably doesn't even know we're here," said another biker, crossing his arms. Max's ears twitched. He had heard their voices. He could sense something was off. His body tensed just a little, but he kept walking, staying focused on Sarah. The bikers didn't move, but their eyes followed Sarah and Max as they got closer. The biker with the scar leaned in toward the others. "Bet you $10 she won't even notice if we take her dog's leash," he whispered. The others laughed. "Yeah, let's mess with her a little," said the biker in the red bandana. "It'll be funny." They thought it was a joke. They thought Sarah was helpless. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Max, though, was already on alert. His sharp ears had picked up their whispers. He didn't understand every word, but he knew their tone. He knew when people were friendly and when people were not. Right now, these men were not friendly. His tail, which had been relaxed, now stiffened. His muscles tensed. His eyes locked onto the bikers. Sarah, of course, couldn't see any of this. But she had been with Max long enough to feel when he changed. "Easy, Max," she murmured, gently patting his back. Max didn't make a sound. But inside, he was ready. Sarah kept walking, unaware of what the bikers were planning. She trusted the world to be kind. She believed people would respect her. But not everyone did. The bikers watched as she got closer. The man with the scar grinned. 3, 2, 1. He whispered. As Sarah walked past them, one of the bikers whistled sharply. It was a test. A trick. Many dogs would have turned their heads at the sound. Many dogs would have gotten distracted. But not Max. He didn't move. He didn't flinch. His training was too strong. He kept his eyes forward, focused only on Sarah and their path. The bikers raised their eyebrows. Huh. Tough dog, one muttered. The man with the red bandana smirked. Let's see if he's really so tough. Then, he stepped forward right into Sarah's path. Sarah stopped walking. She could feel someone standing in front of her, blocking the way. "Excuse me," she said calmly. No answer. Max stood still, his body tense. His ears pointed forward. His eyes locked onto the biker's legs. Sarah tried again. "Excuse me. Can you let me pass?" The biker with the red bandana laughed. "Oh, sorry, miss. Didn't see you there." The others chuckled. Sarah knew that laugh. She had heard it before, many times in life. It was the laugh of bullies. And Max knew it too. His lips pulled back just slightly, revealing a hint of his sharp teeth. His growl was soft, so soft no one but Sarah could hear it. Something wasn't right. Sarah's heart beat faster. She could sense it now. This wasn't just a small joke. These men weren't just curious. They wanted to cause trouble. Max could feel it too. He wasn't just a guide dog. He was a protector. And he had a job to do. The biker with the scar smirked. "What do you think, boys? Should we help the lady out?" The others laughed. They had no idea what they were about to start. Because Max was ready. And in just a few seconds, everything would change. Sarah walked through the park, enjoying the fresh air. The sun was warm on her face. She could hear the soft rustling of leaves in the trees and the happy sounds of children playing in the distance. It was a peaceful afternoon. Max, her loyal guide dog, walked beside her, strong and steady. His large paws patted softly on the path, and his ears twitched, always listening. Sarah couldn't see the world around her, but she didn't need to. She had Max. He was her eyes, her protector, and her best friend. But as they passed by a wooden bench, something changed. A group of 5 bikers sat near the bench. Their motorcycles were lined up beside them, shining under the sun. The men wore black leather jackets, ripped jeans, and heavy boots. Some had tattoos covering their arms. Others had thick beards and dark sunglasses. They weren't just sitting quietly, they were watching. They saw Sarah walking past them, holding onto Max's harness. She had no cane, no one guiding her, just the dog leading her way. One of the bikers, a tall man with a leather jacket, leaned forward. He had a deep scar on his cheek and a cruel smirk on his face. "Look at this poor blind lady," he chuckled. His voice was loud, meant for everyone to hear. The other bikers laughed. The man with the scar shook his head. "Bet she wouldn't even know if someone took her little dog away." Another biker, a man with a red bandana, grinned. "Yeah. She wouldn't see a thing." The group snickered. To them, this was funny. To Max, this was a threat. One of the bikers whistled, trying to get Max's attention. Most dogs would turn their heads at the sound. Most dogs would get distracted. But Max wasn't like most dogs. He was a trained Navy SEAL K9. He had been taught to stay focused, to never react to tricks or distractions. So, Max didn't move. He didn't even flick his ear. Instead, he stayed alert. His eyes stayed forward. His body became stiff, muscles ready. Sarah, feeling the small change in Max's posture, tightened her grip on his harness. She couldn't see the bikers. She didn't know what they looked like. But she could hear them. She could hear their low voices, their laughter, and the way they were too interested in her and Max. Sarah's heart beat a little faster. Something was wrong. Sarah had faced rude people before. People sometimes stared at her or spoke to her like she was helpless. She was used to it. But this was different. These men weren't just being rude. They were being cruel. They thought she was weak. Sarah took a slow, deep breath. She kept walking, trying to ignore them. But the bikers weren't done. The man with the scar leaned forward and said, "Hey, lady. You sure you know where you're going?" Sarah kept walking. Another biker chuckled. Maybe she thinks her dog is taking her to Disneyland. The group burst into laughter. Max's ears twitched. His sharp eyes glanced toward the men. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He just watched. He was assessing the threat. Max was trained for dangerous missions. He had been in war zones. He had faced gunfire. He had taken down enemies twice his size. So, a few bikers. They were nothing. But Max didn't underestimate anyone. He knew bad people when he saw them. He knew when someone was just joking and when someone was dangerous. Right now, these men weren't just joking. They were testing Sarah. And that meant Max had to be ready. The biker with the red bandana leaned over to his friends and whispered, "Let's mess with her a little. Just for fun." The man with the scar grinned. "Yeah. Let's see what she does." Another biker smirked. "Think her dog will protect her?" "Let's find out," the man with the scar said. Then, he stood up. Sarah was just a few steps away when the man with the scar took one big step right in front of her. She didn't see him, but she felt it. The air shifted. The sounds around her changed. Max stopped walking fast and firm. His body became rigid, his tail stiff. Sarah froze. She knew someone was there. Max never stopped for no reason. Her grip on his harness tightened. "Excuse me," she said, her voice calm. "Can I pass?" The biker didn't move. The other bikers watched closely, their grins wide. Max stared up at the man, his deep brown eyes locked onto him. The man laughed. "Oh, sorry, lady. Didn't see you there." His friend snickered. Sarah felt anger rise inside her. But she stayed calm. "Please move," she said. The man didn't budge. Instead, he leaned in closer. "What if I don't?" he asked. Max shifted his weight. His ears went up. His muscles tightened. He was ready. He had fought dangerous men before. He had taken down enemies in battle. This man? He was nothing. Max didn't growl yet, not yet. But he wanted to. Sarah felt the tension in Max's body. She trusted him. If he thought there was danger, then there was danger. She lifted her chin. "Move," she said again. Her voice was stronger this time. The biker's grin faded just a little. Max's eyes never blinked. The air felt heavy. The other bikers watched, waiting to see what would happen. The man with the scar didn't know that if he made the wrong move, Max wouldn't hesitate. Because Max was not just a guide dog. He was a warrior. And he was ready to protect his handler. The biker chuckled. He reached out his hand, toward Max's harness. A mistake. A big mistake. Max's eyes flashed. His lips pulled back just slightly, showing a hint of sharp teeth. He let out a low, deep growl so soft, only Sarah and the man could hear it. The biker froze. He felt the warning before he even fully processed it. This wasn't just a dog. This was a trained fighter. A protector. A Navy SEAL K9. The biker took a step back. Relax, sweetheart. We were just kidding, he muttered. Sarah didn't smile. Let's go, Max. And just like that, they walked past. But Max? He never took his eyes off them. Because he knew. This wasn't over yet. The air was thick with tension. Sarah stood tall, her fingers gripping Max's harness. She couldn't see the bikers, but she could feel their presence. She could hear the way they shuffled closer. She could sense the way Max's muscles tensed beneath her hand. Max was always calm. Always steady. But right now, he was alert too alert. Something was about to happen. And Sarah knew it. One of the bikers took a step forward. His heavy boots crunched against the gravel path. Relax, sweetheart, he said, his voice slick like oil. We just want to see the pup. Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard voices like his before. Mocking. Arrogant. Dangerous. Max didn't move. He stayed still as a statue, his ears twitching, his deep brown eyes locked on the men. Sarah took a slow breath. She refused to let fear take over. Please step away, she said, her voice calm but firm. But they didn't. The men chuckled. One of them, the one with the red bandana, reached out toward Max's harness. Before his fingers could even graze the leather strap, Max moved. Lightning fast. The large dog spun around, his powerful jaws clamping down on the biker's wrist with precision. Not too hard. Not enough to break the skin. But enough to send a message. Enough to make the man yelp. Ow! What the? The biker stumbled back, his face twisting in shock. The others froze. Sarah felt Max's deep growl rumble through the air. It wasn't loud. It wasn't wild. It was controlled. A warning. Sarah smirked. Not just a dog, she said smoothly. The bikers stared at Max, their cocky grins fading. This is crazy, one of them muttered. He bit me. The biker with the red bandana hissed, holding his wrist. The man with the scarred cheek narrowed his eyes at Max. It's just a guide dog, he said, but his voice was unsure now. Max stood beside Sarah, tall and unmoving. His ears perked, his tail straight. No barking. No snapping. No wild aggression. Just focus. Just discipline. And somehow, that made him even scarier. Max was trained for war. Trained to stay calm under fire. Trained to protect without hesitation. He wasn't like other dogs. He didn't attack in anger. He didn't bite for fun. Every move he made was precise. Calculated. If he had wanted to break the biker's wrist, he would have. But Max was holding back. For now. Did you see that? The man with the red bandana rubbed his wrist, glaring at Sarah. You better control your mutt. Another biker spat. Sarah tilted her head slightly. She could hear the frustration in their voices. They were mad. Mad that Max wasn't scared. Mad that she wasn't scared. She smiled. I think you should walk away, she said simply. But she knew they wouldn't. Not yet. Bullies never walked away until they were forced to. The scarred biker squinted at Max. "Something's off about this dog," he muttered. The others nodded. "He's too controlled," one whispered. The red bandana biker scoffed. "Please. He's just a guide dog." Then he did something very stupid. He lunged forward, clapping his hands in front of Max's face. Most dogs would flinch. Most dogs would back away. Max. Max didn't even blink. The biker froze mid-motion. His smirk wavered. Max stared. His eyes were locked. Focused. Unshaken. A trained warrior's stare. The biker felt it. Something wasn't right. This wasn't a normal dog. One of the younger bikers leaned closer to the man with the scar. His voice was quiet. Almost nervous. "Man. I think this dog is military trained." The scarred biker's jaw clenched. "That's impossible," he muttered. "He's a guide dog." The younger biker shook his head. "No," he said. "Look at him." And they did. Max's perfect stillness. The way he never broke eye contact. The lack of fear. Everything about him screamed discipline. Trained. Deadly. Not just a guide dog. Max still didn't move. But he didn't have to. His body language said everything. It told the bikers. "Try it again. See what happens." The man with the red bandana took a step back, his throat bobbing as he swallowed. The biker with the scar clenched his fists. He hated this. Hated that a blind woman and her dog were making him feel small. He had started this as a joke. But now he wasn't laughing. "Fine," the scarred man said, forcing a chuckle. "We were just messing around, lady. No harm, no foul." But Sarah heard the lie in his voice. He wasn't done. Not yet. Sarah wasn't fooled. And neither was Max. Because as the biker turned, pretending to walk away, Sarah heard it. The shift in weight. The sudden step back toward her. And in that split second, Max moved again. Fast as lightning. Max spun, his teeth flashing as he clamped onto the man's jacket sleeve before the biker's hand could reach Sarah's arm. The force of it yanked the biker off balance. Whoa! The man stumbled, nearly falling. Max held firm. Not biting flesh, not yet. Just holding. Warning. The biker's eyes widened. He had never seen a dog move that fast. Never seen a dog control an attack like that. Max could have ripped through the leather. But he didn't. Because Max was disciplined. Max was trained for bigger fights than this. And suddenly, the biker knew. This wasn't a fight he could win. The breaking point. "Let go, let go." The biker shouted, shaking his arm. Sarah gave one command. "Max. Release." And instantly Max let go. No hesitation. No delay. Just perfect obedience. The biker stumbled back, his breathing heavy. His friends just stared. Nobody was laughing anymore. Nobody was smirking. Because now, they understood. This wasn't just a dog. This was a soldier. Sarah turned her head toward the bikers, her voice calm. "Like I said," she said, "you should walk away." And this time, they did. But as Max and Sarah continued their walk, Max still listened. Still watched. Because something told him. This wasn't over yet. The air was thick with tension. The bikers stood frozen, eyes darting between Sarah and Max. For a moment, no one moved. Then, in the blink of an eye, Max's entire stance changed. His muscles coiled like a spring, his head low, eyes locked onto the biggest threat. His ears stood tall, his tail straight as an arrow. And then, a deep, low growl rumbled from his chest. Not a wild, angry growl. Not a scared, defensive growl. A controlled, deliberate, trained growl. The kind that says, make one wrong move, and you won't like what happens next. The bikers felt it in their bones. Their cocky grins faded. Their hands twitched at their sides. For the first time that day, they felt something they weren't used to feeling. Fear. One of the younger bikers, a man with a scruffy beard and nervous eyes, took a shaky step back. He had seen that stance before. And suddenly, the pieces clicked in his mind. His voice was barely a whisper. Dude, that's no normal dog. That's military. The leader, the one with the scarred cheek, shot him an annoyed glance. What are you talking about? But the younger biker was already pale as a ghost. He swallowed hard. That's a SEAL dog. The words hung in the air. Max didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't flinch. He just watched. Measured. Calculated. Ready. The scarred biker's smirk vanished completely. He had heard of SEAL dogs before. Legends. Warriors. Dogs trained to parachute out of planes. Dogs trained to sniff out explosives. Dogs trained to take down armed terrorists without hesitation. He had never seen one in real life. And now one was standing right in front of him. And he had just messed with it. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. The leader raised his hand slowly, his face suddenly much less confident. Hey, he stammered, forcing a nervous chuckle. This was all just a joke. We weren't really gonna do anything. No harm, no foul, right? His voice was higher now. Less sure. Less tough. The bikers behind him started shuffling backward. But Sarah? She didn't move. She stood tall, her expression calm. You sure about that? She asked smoothly. Her voice wasn't angry. Wasn't shouting. But somehow, it was scarier than if she had yelled. Because it was steady. Because it was controlled. Because she wasn't scared. And that made them even more nervous. Sarah takes a step forward. Sarah took one small step forward. The leader flinched. Max didn't budge. Didn't break eye contact. Didn't need to. Sarah tilted her head slightly. You know, she said, it's funny. The leader blinked rapidly, his hands still raised. What's funny? Sarah smiled. People like you always think you know everything. She let the words sink in. Always assume who's weak. Who's strong. Who's an easy target. The bikers shifted uncomfortably. Sarah let her fingers trail along Max's harness. You thought I was just some blind woman, she continued. Her tone was still soft. Still dangerous. You thought my dog was just a guide. She could hear the bikers breathing heavily now. And now? She asked. Silence. Then, the leader cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, yeah. Honest mistake. We didn't mean nothing by it. Sarah smiled. Of course not. The bikers were visibly shaken now. The leader, trying to regain control, forced a smirk. Well, we'll just be on our way then. Sarah tilted her head. You know, she said casually, Max doesn't forget faces. The leader stiffened. Sarah smiled wider. Next time you think about messing with someone, she said, her voice low and clear, remember you never know who's really protecting them. The leader's face drained of color. The bikers nodded quickly. Yep, got it, one mumbled. Loud and clear, another added. The leader forced another awkward chuckle. Yeah, sure thing, lady. Won't happen again. Then they ran. Sarah waited until the sound of boots pounding against pavement faded into the distance. Then, finally, She knelt beside Max. She ran her hand gently over his fur, feeling his steady breathing. She smiled. "You did good, buddy." Max's tail wagged once. A small movement. Calm. Controlled. Just like him. Sarah stood up, gripping his harness once more. "Come on," she said. "Let's go home." And together, they walked away. Unbothered. Unshaken. Unstoppable. Because Max was more than just a dog. Max was a warrior. The bikers scattered like leaves in the wind. Their footsteps pounded against the pavement as they ran, not even daring to look back. Their tough guy act? Gone. Their laughter? Silenced. The only sound left was the soft rustling of trees and the steady breathing of Max. Max stood tall, his eyes still watching even though the danger had passed. His ears twitched, listening for any sign that they might come back. His stance was still strong, still ready. But Sarah knew. She knew it was over. She knew Max had done his job. She reached down, her fingers running through his thick fur. "Good boy," she whispered. Max's tail wagged just once. Calm. Controlled. Just like him. Then. A new sound. Boots. Steady. Firm. Not running, like the bikers. Walking. With purpose. A deep voice followed. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Sarah turned her head slightly, recognizing the voice. A police officer. The weight of his utility belt jingled as he came closer. Max didn't flinch. Didn't growl. Didn't move. Sarah knew why. Max had already assessed him. No threat. Just help. Sarah smiled, her hand still resting on Max's back. "We're just fine, officer," she said smoothly. The officer glanced around. At the empty park. At the motorcycle tracks in the dirt, where the bikers had been. At Sarah, standing tall. And at Max. Max, standing like a guardian. A protector. A soldier. The officer's gaze softened. "I'd expect nothing less from a SEAL legend," he chuckled. Sarah chuckled too. It was a soft, knowing laugh. Because she knew the truth. Max wasn't just any dog. Max wasn't just her guide. Max was a warrior. And today? He had proved it again. She gave Max one last pat and straightened up. "Thank you, officer," she said. But her voice had no fear. No nervousness. Because she knew. She was never alone. Not with Max. Never with Max. The officer gave a small nod, his eyes still lingering on Max. He had heard stories about dogs like him. He had read about them. Seen them on TV. But to witness it in real life? To see one of these elite warriors in action? It was something else entirely. He tipped his hat. "You two stay safe," he said. Sarah smiled. "We always do." The officer chuckled again. Then. He walked away. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the air cool against her skin. Then, she adjusted Max's harness. "Come on, buddy," she said. Max's ears perked up. His tail gave another small, confident wag. And together, they walked. Away from the park. Away from the trouble. With heads held high. Because today, Sarah had won. Not by fighting. Not by shouting. Not by running. But by trusting Max. By knowing his strength. By knowing her own strength. Somewhere, those bikers were catching their breath. Somewhere, they were talking. And Sarah knew. They would think twice next time. They would remember this day. They would remember the blind woman. And the dog that was more than just a dog. They would remember the low growl, the sharp movements, the fear in their own chests. And maybe, just maybe, they would change. Because not all battles need fists to be won. By the time Sarah and Max reached home, the sun was starting to set. The golden light poured through the windows, making everything warm. Sarah took off her jacket, hanging it by the door. Max walked in first, his paws soft against the wooden floor. He made his way to his favorite spot. A soft rug in the living room, where he could always keep an eye on things. Sarah chuckled. Even now, he was on guard. "Relax, buddy," she said with a smile. "You earned it." Max gave a soft huff and laid down, resting his head on his paws. His body relaxed. But his ears? Still listening. Always listening. Because once a warrior, always a warrior. Sarah sat on the couch, running her fingers along Max's fur. She thought about the day. About how people judge too quickly. About how the world underestimates the quiet ones. And she smiled. Because the truth was, sometimes, the strongest protectors are the ones you never see coming. She reached down, giving Max one last gentle scratch behind the ears. "Good boy," she whispered. Max's tail wagged just once. Because he knew. Because he was. The park was quiet again. The sun had begun its slow descent, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. A soft breeze moved through the trees, rustling the leaves like a gentle whisper. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the cool air against her skin. She tilted her head slightly, listening to the world around her. The distant laughter of children. The soft chirping of birds. The rhythmic sound of Max's paws against the pavement. Everything felt calm. Safe. But Sarah knew it wasn't luck. It was Max. As Sarah and Max walked on, people passed by, unaware of what had just happened. They saw a woman and her guide dog, moving through the world with quiet confidence. No one knew the truth. No one knew that this dog was more than just a guide. More than just a pet. Max was a protector. A warrior. A legend. And Sarah? She was never alone. Not with Max. Never with Max. Somewhere, those bikers were still catching their breath. Still feeling the fear in their bones. Still replaying the moment in their heads. They had laughed at a blind woman. They had underestimated her dog. And they had paid the price. Not with fists. Not with anger. But with fear. Because fear is a teacher, too. And today, they had learned a powerful lesson. Never judge someone by what you see. Because you never know what they're truly capable of. Max walked beside Sarah, his ears still listening. His eyes still watching. To most people, he looked calm. Gentle. Just a dog. But Sarah knew the truth. She felt his quiet strength. She knew his past. A past filled with training, discipline, and courage. A past filled with missions, danger, and loyalty. He had once fought alongside heroes. And now, he was her hero. Sarah gave Max a soft pat on the head. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. Max didn't need to wag his tail to show he understood. He just kept walking steady, strong, and ready. Because that's what true protectors do. They don't ask for thanks. They don't need recognition. They just do their job. Silently. Fearlessly. Faithfully. Sarah had spent her whole life being underestimated. People saw her white cane and thought she was weak. They saw her dark glasses and assumed she needed help. They spoke louder when they talked to her, as if blindness meant she couldn't understand. But today? Today had proved something important. Not just to those bikers. But to herself. She wasn't weak. She wasn't helpless. She wasn't someone to pity. She was strong. She was capable. She had Max. And Max had her. Some of the strongest warriors don't wear uniforms. Some of the bravest souls don't shout. Some of the most powerful protectors don't look the part. They walk silently. They move unnoticed. And they wait until the moment they are needed. Then, they rise. As Sarah and Max continued their walk, the city lights flickered on. People rushed past, busy with their own lives. No one knew what had just happened. No one knew that a blind woman and her dog had just taught a lesson that would never be forgotten. A lesson about strength. A lesson about respect. A lesson about never judging too quickly. Sarah and Max disappeared into the crowd, blending in like shadows in the night. But their impact? Their story? It would linger. It would stay. Because sometimes, the strongest protectors come in the most unexpected forms. And those who judge by appearances? They're the ones who never see it coming.